I can keep listening. Probably every genre starts with some new technology, pop coming from radio or whatever. And so I think that one of the most impactful things that one can do in music, I don't think that writing songs individually, I'm going to change the world. I don't think that I have a story to tell. This is my story to tell, right? I don't think I have some heartfelt song to write to change America, to change people's whatever. That's not going to be my impact on art. But as a technological person, this has a strong potential to create new scenes, create new genres, create something different. And that, I think, is what I'm most excited about, is just what creative people will do with these tools.
Zach Evans helped found and is head of Harmonai, a Stability AI research lab and online community. Stability AI is the world's leading open source artificial intelligence company. As an integral part of Stability AI, Harmonai is dedicated to creating open source generative audio models and pushing forward creative uses of generative AI in music production. Harmonai is by artists and for artists. Zach is a programmer and musician and is driven by the computational possibilities of the future of music and the belief that community is everything. Zach knows that generative AI is a nuclear bomb for the music industry, and his mission is to turn it into nuclear energy. He cares deeply about artistic freedom and the musicians, DJs, and producers that he's empowering with Harmonai. He leads with substance and is most excited about how people will use these tools beyond what he can imagine, and hopes people make music that's weirder and different from what exists today, pushing the boundaries of the technology. Zach's passion for community, music, and artistic freedom is infectious. He landed in a dream role, and his story is intertwined with the evolution of generative AI music. Today, you'll hear his story and how he went from being a Microsoft developer to becoming an EDM musician to now leading a dynamic team of artists and programmers to develop the next generation of AI music models. Dolly Parton and AI also came up, and you'll hear how Zach demystifies diffusion, shares his perspective on open source development, discusses the challenges to improve AI music models, and thoughtfully articulates his vision of AI technology empowering artists. Enjoy.
But have you ever thought, what if this is all just a dream?
Welcome to Creativity Squared. Discover how creatives are collaborating with artificial intelligence in your inbox, on YouTube, and on your preferred podcast platform. Hi, I'm Helen Todd, your host, and I'm so excited to have you join the weekly conversations I'm having with amazing pioneers in the space. The intention of these conversations is to ignite our collective imagination at the intersection of AI and creativity to envision a world where artists thrive. Zach, it is so nice to have you on the Creativity Squared show. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here. Stoked to talk about some cool stuff today.
I am so excited, especially based on our pre-call. You have so much knowledge and passion and excitement around the topic about AI and music. But let's start with out the gate. What's the most important thing you want our viewers and listeners to know at this moment in time?
Yeah, so there's so many big things to say about AI and music. I think the first one is don't be afraid. And then, I think that it's a very powerful technology. And a thing I've been saying is, it's almost like a nuclear bomb for the music industry. And I think that it's our job to try to turn that into nuclear energy. Find a way to take the power of this technology and really support artists, have it help art thrive and artists thrive and be a strong but beneficial force in the music scene.
Ever since you said that, I've repeated that so many times about the nuclear bomb and how to convert it to nuclear energy. So let's dive in. So you're the head of Harmonai at Stability AI. And for those who don't know Stability AI, I know they're a major player in the AI space, but can you just kind of introduce our viewers to Stability AI first?
Yeah, so Stability AI is a company that started a few years back by a man named Imad Mostak. And it is essentially the building blocks that help activate humanity's potential, focused on generative AI systems, but really at a high level, it's an organization to organize and support a bunch of people in the open source AI space. So it's the definitions of and goals of it have changed a little bit over time. But yeah, being one of the main players in the generative AI space for images, for audio, for all the different modalities.
That's great. And then for Stability AI, as I understand it, really introduced diffusion, and that was a game changer in the generative AI. Is that correct?
It's a bit of a longer story that I guess I can go into a bit about that, kind of the history of diffusion, text to image, and how we got to where we are today. So the idea of these diffusion models, let's talk about it in terms of images first. That goes kind of the first big thing to pop off in terms of generative models with diffusion. The idea of being able to add noise to something and then remove the noise from it, but removing noise in a way that makes it something, as opposed to just we could remove noise from noise and get all one color or something. But the idea here is that it creates things by turning noise into signal. The original paper on generative models with diffusion came out, the author was Joshua Soldikstein in 2015. I think he worked for Google, maybe. The big breakthrough was a release in 2020, I want to say, by Ho et al. On these image generation diffusion models. And that was from OpenAI. So they released that kind of the first big diffusion thing. So OpenAI released their unconditional diffusion model. So that's not text to image. That's just noise to something. They also, before releasing that, they released their DALL-E 1. So it's the time just called DALL-E, but their first paper of the first time people really saw good text-based image synthesis. The classic example was like an astronaut riding a horse or a chair shaped like an avocado. Those kind of became those are their default examples when they released the paper and the blog post about that. And it was super cool. It was like for the first time, you can actually do really good, you can put it in a description and get an image. And that was, people were fascinated by that. But OpenAI didn't release that model. They shared a blog post, shared examples, but kept it internal. And that led to a lot of people outside of OpenAI being like, hey, wait, but we wanted to play with that. But that seems really cool and I want to try it. But of course, making a thing like that requires a whole bunch of data, a whole bunch of compute. And, a bunch of people on Discord didn't really have access to that. So there's kind of this community effort and this community growing around this of how can we make an open source version of that? How can we get something like that where you can put in text and get an image and have it be a thing you don't have to, work at OpenAI to play with. And that led to a few more releases from OpenAI that came out after that really enabled that. So the first one was this model called CLIP, Contrastive Language Image Pre-Training. That's basically at its most basic definition. You give it some text, you give it an image, and it tells you how well that text matches that image. That's what that model is meant to do. So the community took that model and a different model called Big GAN. There's a guy named AdVadNow on Twitter. And he put those two things together and realized with some special math, you could take this GAN generator and this clip model and have it kind of alter the image until it fit the prompt better. And that was kind of that was called the Big Sleep. And that was kind of the first big release of open source text to image. And it was abstract and weird and incoherent and led to people posting things on Twitter of I'll pay you $100, you can name anything in this picture. And it was all, of course, incoherent nothingness, so you couldn't name anything. But that kind of led to some liminal space, weird creative images. And then Catherine Krausen, another independent researcher, now the generative media lead at Stability AI, put together that clip model and that unconditional diffusion model that it'll just denoise things into data. And with some of the same math, what's called clip guided diffusion, was able to, you put in the prompt and you try to optimize this thing to make a thing that, matches that image prompt better. A lot of machine learning is just find a way to make some number smaller. So the number to make smaller there is how much the image doesn't match the prompt, essentially. And so that led to the like a real explosion in growing communities on Discord and on Twitter of people using these Google Colab notebooks. Google Colab being a service Google provides that you can get access to really good high-end GPUs for a comparatively very low price. It's gotten more expensive over time as it's become more popular. GPUs are super expensive. To be able to use a thing like this, it was $2,000 to $4,000 for a good GPU, as opposed to $10 a month on Google Colab. Pretty easy decision to make there. So that led to this really big explosion of online communities of trying to make this better, trying to work in other kinds of math, other kinds of models to improve that. And that's kind of where I came into it. So that was the right, Catherine Carlson figuring out how to use these two OpenAI models to make text to image in the public. At the same time, of course, there were other research labs trying to find ways to do similar things with fewer resources. One of them was the lab at the University of Heidelberg, now it's LMU Munich. It's the computer vision comp viz group there put together a model called latent diffusion, which is instead of trying to noise and denoise raw images, which you would say in pixel space, you noise and denoise encodings of images where it's just less data, and you have some other model that can compress and expand images to make it easier to do stuff. That's the idea of latent diffusion there. And so essentially, and this I'll get into a bit more about stability, but stability supported essentially the next level of that model, and it became kind of a large a bunch of different groups working together on that. And Stability providing the compute, and some of the people at Stability working on some of the different parts, kind of a bunch of different communities coming together to make Stable Diffusion, with Stability providing a lot of the funding and compute for that. And the big deal about that is that when that came out, it's open source. So anyone can use that locally. We have the Stable Diffusion model. You can download it, run it on your phone now. People have optimized this to be super, super fast, super efficient. Could run on a CPU, maybe not as quick as it could on a GPU, of course. But so yeah, the big kind of game changer here was that while we were seeing a lot of these text to image technologies with things like DALL-E 2 or Midjourney, you had to sign up to their websites to use them and pay credits to them to use them. Whereas this, there is a place you can go and pay credits to use Stable Diffusion, but you can also, if you have the right compute for it and the right stuff, download it locally. Make this stuff for the only, I would say for free, but the cost of running your GPU, the cost of electricity, essentially. And not only that, but because anyone could download this and use this, anyone can improve it. So very quickly, within just days of Stable Diffusion being released to the public, you were able to see people learning how to fine tune it. So take it and make it so it can make images of your dog specifically by just giving it 10 images of your dog, running some code and waiting an hour or two on your own GPU. You can fine tune it and make it more unique and personalizable. People are able to find things like optimizations to make it all run faster or whatever. So that was the big deal of Stable Diffusion, was that it was the first really high quality, publicly available, free and open source text to image model.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think it was another podcast I was listening to from BlackRock talking about the game changer moment. So thank you for explaining that. And, one conversation that does come up when talking about these AI tools and just how powerful they are is the pros and cons of having open source, especially with Stability AI in all the modalities, because with the internet and humanity always comes the lovely bad actors that participate, and you're opening it up to a very powerful tool that's open source that potentially could be in bad actors' hands. So I'm curious what Stability's take is on this conversation.
Yeah, so I can't really speak for the company as a whole in terms of that. I can only speak for my work and my team. And, working in audio, working in music, I think that it's harder to do bad things with it. You can make bad music, sure, but you can do that without AI. I think that there's always going to be trying to adjust for that. and that requires a lot of pre-thought about what models can do and what you put out there. But I think at the end of the day, the alternative to that is the progression of these models is held and is specifically only guided by investments of large corporations. And particularly for creative tools, I think that's not a good and healthy thing for creativity and art in general, right? Like when DALL-E 2 first came out, this was right after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, so kind of a intense political atmosphere there, and they banned the word Ukraine from being put that into DALL-E 2, and not in like even political context, but like beautiful wheat fields in in Ukraine. It's like, oh, you can't, Ukraine is too, you can't say that here. And so it's like, okay, well, that means that they have control over not only the service but expression. And so like I made a tweet back then of like kind of if your art synthesis program won't let you make protest art, it's not for the people. Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, so if you don't have it open source and available to people, then all of the outputs and the expression are controlled by corporations, and their impetus is going to be keep it as banal and safe as possible so that it doesn't blow up on Twitter of someone, it's more about PR than about enabling expression. And that's going to happen for any system that is, behind a paywall, behind a service. And I'm not saying that they should allow anything to be done, because they are a company with PR, and same with stability. We have our interfaces for creating things with stable diffusion, and we won't allow you to put in some words because we think that there's not really much good that can come from that. As well as doing some classification on the images and checking if it's NSFW, blurring them, whatever. But particularly, it is kind of a thing I think in general about creative tools like this. You need to give artists the freedom to be able to do what they want to do. I strongly believe in artistic freedom, and I think that trying to mitigate any possible negative output at the level of a service makes sense from a business perspective. But if that is the only way to access these tools, then that is incredibly limiting on just the future of creativity in this context. I mean, you can pick up a pencil, you can pick up a guitar, or whatever. But as I want these to be useful tools for people to be able to express themselves or have fun or build a community or do whatever, I think it's important that it can be customizable. It can be decentralized. I'm not like, a big, everything should be decentralized. I'm not that big of a crypto person, but, I am an artist and I do come from that community. And yeah, I think that's my long-winded answer there of, yes, there are some bad things that one could do potentially with some of these models, but I think that the alternative is just gray corporate mess of all of these things. It all becomes, just a toy and just a niche thing, or just to make, just churn out corporate art or whatever. And I think it's just better for us to have, to give the individuals more power over what they do with these things.
Yep, I appreciate that perspective. One of the missions of this podcast, our Creativity Squared, is to envision a world where artists not only coexist with AI, but thrive. And, I agree with you that thriving means artistic expression as well. And to a certain extent, I think from the lens or the lane of creativity, a lot of the ethical questions that we're dealing with AI, it is applied, but there's a lot of other applications outside of this lens too, where there might be bigger consequences as well, maybe.
Yeah. I think there's a different bar for responsibility and ethics between for-profit corporations and individual artists. And that's a complicated thing to navigate. But, I think that's a good principle of like, I don't think I'm certainly not in any sort of position to tell artists what they should or should not do with their art. Yeah. So I kind of going back to the same point here, but I think that's That's kind of key for what I do here is whatever we make, I want there to be a version of it that people can take and create how they want with it. Because, and this also ties to things where it's like you can have these models that are improving over time and get better quality outputs over time. But better quality is very subjective and personal and cultural, and music is subjective and personal and cultural. So I think that you need to have some sort of ability to personalize these models and their outputs. Because if people are trying to make this better and better and better, that might be going further and further away from one individual person's taste.
Well, I feel like this is a good segue into Harmonai, because it's by musicians for musicians in regards to music and AI. And you're the head of Harmonai. So why don't you tell us a little bit about specifically what you guys are up to and the tools available, and share what's exciting you about the space right now.
Yeah. So Harmonai is a Discord server, first and foremost. It's the name of the community, and the research lab, fully part of Stability AI, but also opening up to whoever wants to join the server and be a part of it. In terms of actual releases, back last August, we released our first model referred to as Dance Diffusion. And that is more in the style of that original OpenAI unconditional diffusion model. So it's not text to audio; it's just a denoiser essentially. And so essentially, it'll make like random outputs kind of based on what you train it on. So it's really more about the idea of, instead of having here is this base foundation model where out of the box anyone can use it. It's like out of the box, it's all trained on music from one guy. I'll get to that in a little bit, but you can take this, put it onto a Colab notebook, put it onto your local GPU, point at your samples library of your drum loops or your bass sounds or whatever, fine tune that, and it will start spitting out random drum loops and bass sounds and things. Also, because audio is, one of the big challenges in generating stuff with AI in general is just the size of the actual data itself. The sequence length matters a lot. That's why you get things in like, ChatGPT, where they'll have, for those transformer models, you'll get maybe a max sequence length of 4,000 words, something like that. Now they can get up to like 100,000 words, but it's very expensive. With audio, with high fidelity audio, we're doing things like, 48K stereo audio. That's 48,000 numbers per second. So trying to get to that same sequence length, you get less of an output through our perception, right? So, Dance Diffusion, the high fidelity version of that model, 48K stereo, 65,000 samples. That's a second and a half, right? That's not going to get you a full song. It's not going to get you even a full drum loop. Right now, it's better for sound design and things. There's also a model that, the 3-second model or lower sample rate gets you longer outputs, but for lower quality, of course. That's what we released. That with as a Colab notebook, as a GitHub repo, and some pre-trained models. And the idea there was kind of, trying to kick off a bit of the same energy that I saw in that text to image space in the audio space. And times have changed since then, so it didn't quite go the same. But that's what we released. That's gotten a great reception. That's gotten, I'm shared that with artists that I look up to and have met over the few years on Discord, and it's gotten some great responses. Talking to artists like Mr. Bill or AU5, Virtual Riot, artists were like, I come from the electronic music space, and those are big producers. Those are, well-respected sound designers. And my goal from the beginning here has been, all right, there's a lot of stuff that, like, there's a lot of room for improvement that I could see in music machine learning. And so it's very rewarding to be working on these things and sharing them with the artists I look up to, and they're like, this is really cool, and I see how it's useful. So we released that back in August or September of last year. We've been since then, supporting the community around people using that to make music, running some production challenges of like, make a song that's, up to 4 minutes long, using Dance Diffusion for 2 of the elements at least. Tell us how you do it, submit it. We'll have an event. Everyone comes on stage in Discord server and talks about their track. So that's what we've released. And since then, we've been cooking. There's been a lot of advancements in music generation since then. Things like Music LM from Google, Music Gen from Meta. There's been a whole whole bunch of papers this year on music generation. But essentially, we're trying to follow the image space in terms of, and that's what's true for a lot of audio ML stuff. Follow the image space in terms of, okay, cool, get high quality text to audio working, try to get longer sequence lengths. Can we get a whole song out of this? Can we get maybe 10 seconds for a loop? That's what we're working on now, is longer form generation, working on supporting volunteer research projects, and hopefully more to share soon.
Lots of teasers on what's to come. Well, in the opening, you did say you're sitting on a nuclear bomb and want to figure out how to turn that into nuclear energy. And can you expand on like what you mean by that relative to the music industry, like what AI and how transformative it can be for the music industry?
Yeah. So I guess I'll bring this back to kind of the revelations that started me. That got me to start Harmonai, and I guess I'll take this an opportunity to try to tell a bit more of the longer story and build up to that.
Please do, because your story is so tied into the evolution of music and AI. So I think that's great.
Yeah, and it all flows from one thing to the next. I keep trying to start in the middle, and then I go backwards and forwards to jump around a lot. So, so back at the beginning of lockdown, when the pandemic started, my life had just gone under a big shift. My social life had totally just changed. Ended a big relationship. And suddenly it was like, all right, I basically rebuilt my life on Discord. It was like March 2022. My life in person was weird. And so it was nice to have an escape of like, going on Discord, finding these communities of artists. I'm a raver. I'm in the electronic music scene, and finding communities of artists online, because it's like that was one of my big interests. Was I want to talk about EDM and these artists and bass music and things. So I also looked up to a lot. Trivecta started a Discord server, and I joined that and became super active in there. Made a bunch of friends. Was hanging out in voice chat all day, every day with these new friends. And then kind of from there, joined a few different servers. So for the artist Kill the Noise, for Tasha Baxter, some other electronic music artists that I looked up to. And essentially in there, got really ingrained into those communities. I had just been starting to learn how to make music on my own for, a few years before that, but never really got into it. Didn't have anyone to do it with. I could share it with friends, but they didn't actually have that much opinions on it. So diving into these Discord communities, learning to make music, being a part of it, it's very different when you're trying to learn a skill like this with people than just by yourself in YouTube videos and things. So, got super into that, made some great friends. That's where I met Noah, Two Scoops, our mutual friend Drew's music production partner. And just, it was, just wonderful new life of like, okay, now it's these creative communities. I was working at Microsoft at the time, so much more technical, objective job, and then working with these, creative people. It was a whole new world. It was amazing. Running production challenges, learning to make music, talking with producers. And around December of that year, 2020, there were some big AI releases like Jukebox from OpenAI, which was the first good high fidelity, long form song generator using Transformers language modeling stuff. And it took like a day to get a song length output. It took a really, really long time. But it was like, this is really cool. This is clearly something. And I was, kind of co-hosting these Twitch streams from Kill the Noise. And I was on an episode there with him where he was messing around with these tools, and he's a very experienced electronic music producer. And diving into these new tools, his kind of conclusion after a few hours was, "This is cool, this is neat, but not really up to the standard of quality for me to use it in my music as a tool." And I was like, "Well, that's a thing to have as a goal. That's really neat." And so I, took that opportunity to really start diving into machine learning. And I dabbled a bit before, here and there, but it was always like the code was too hard to read, or you needed more compute or whatever. But at that time, late 2020, I really dove into the scene of like, who are the movers and shakers in music ML? And I found this duo, Databots, who they had like his YouTube channel with his like infinite generated death metal streams. That channel's still going. It's been making infinite death metal for like 4 years now. And I found them on Twitter, and I found like this jukebox Discord community, and I got really into the stuff. I found this new release DDSP by Google Magenta, which is their audio music ML team. Started talking to the DataBots guys. CJ was the one I was talking to. These two guys, CJ and Zach, and he was super great to talk to. I was like, I'm just diving into the space now. I want to be a part of it. I don't have like a PhD in this stuff. Can I do it? He's like, oh yeah, we don't have PhDs. We started doing stuff from like hackathons, and now we actually advise PhDs. And I'm like, cool, it's actually possible. All right, just super, super excited. And I'm like, how can I get more into this? And he was saying, well, this Saturday is actually the NeurIPS conference's workshop on machine learning and design. And I'm like, well, that's incredibly convenient. They're like, oh, the big ML design workshop is happening in 4 days. I'm like, well, that's perfect timing. Okay. So I went there, and I met some people that were some of the authors of the things that I had done. I was this excited trying to get everyone on board of like, I want to find, where is the music ML community? Where is the place like the communities that I've been in, where there's people that are equally excited, equally learning things together, equally pushing forward on this? And I couldn't find one. There wasn't one. There was like a Slack community, the Sound of AI, that they weren't talking about the things that I was interested in. And outside of that, it was like, I realized, all right, I'm going to have to go work for OpenAI or work for Google or change my job, whatever, go get a PhD to do this stuff. So that kind of waned. And I was like, well, that's unfortunate, but I'll just go back to I'll keep my job working at Microsoft. I'll keep working on music, whatever. This isn't the time. It's still a little bit ivory tower. So during that year, 2021, I was still focusing more on music, focusing on building communities, meeting artists, going to shows, ended up getting backstage for some shows, meeting more artists. And that kind of culminated in the one and only DJ set that I have played in December of that year. I got to open for some of my favorite artists. It was such a cool time. AU5 was one of the ones that I opened for, legendary sound designer who I'd wanted to meet for a while and finally got to. So I had this cool, it's like my network was really built up of like these producers. And then around that same time, Noah, who I talked about earlier, introduced me to all that text to image stuff. Like I was talking about earlier, there was this ongoing community that started around the beginning of 2021 of this clip guided diffusion and all these collab notebooks. And so there was one called Pity, and the server was called vClips. And that was kind of the melting pot that started a lot of this. And there's a couple different communities as well. There's Luther AI, which was a Discord community focusing on large language models. There was Lion, who did large data sets and a lot of the image model stuff. So I got into this text to image space, and I was just enamored by it because I am not a visual artist. I can't draw to save my life, but I am a programmer. I am, I can dive into some code, and in these collab notebooks, you have all the nice little interface things. You can double click and you get the actual code itself. You can change it, manipulate that, figure out how it works, try to change code without breaking it too bad. And so I was actually able to get a bit of an intuition on how this stuff works, diving into the code, being able to change it, make it better. Found this new notebook someone made called Disco Diffusion, and that was taking that same text to image thing, but using some special tricks to turn it into animation. And so that was, if you zoom in on a picture, you get some like zoom in artifacts, right? But if you then noise it and denoise it a little bit with these diffusion models, it gets rid of the artifacts, makes new details. So keep doing that over and over again, you get kind of a fake infinite zoom effect. And it was just cool animations. And it was like, oh, this would be great for like music videos. Like I got a bunch of friends who make music and are DJs and producers, but they don't have a whole lot of art assets, or, it's hard for them to get stuff for a music video or whatever. So I used that, and I was making audio reactive videos for friends. And so I got really into that. I got into the dev team for Disco Diffusion. And this is all the time, still just me messing around. I was seeing this as like I'm messing around in the DAW for making music here. I'm messing around in Collab to mess around and make some fun art stuff. And I think a really important part about that was the community. And that's the thing I really want to drive in general for this stuff is community is everything. Art can be, I've thought about a lot, is like art can be a lot of things. Art as commodity, art as expression, art as community, art as comedy. And I think that was really what spoke to me the most, and what I really loved about the AI art community at the time, and still now, but particularly then, a lot of the vitriol that there is now wasn't around then because it was still kind of niche. People didn't know about it as much. Was just like I was just seeing people doing good work, making these cool, innovative changes, sharing them on Twitter, and it was all just like independent nerds, excited, usually heavy ADHD, technical programmers and artists who were just like, hey, I changed this and I made this little feature for it. Like, oh, it was only a couple lines of code. I'm not really sure how, I'm not really much of a programmer, but it did this. And like, that's groundbreaking. Like, this is such an opportunity for like even a little bit of improvement is huge. So I was as part of that community. Emad Mostak was part of it. So the founder of Stability AI, he was one of the many people that was just kind of a regular in these communities. He was a regular, a known person in the Eleuther AI community. And again, I was working on the Disco Diffusion stuff. And then Noah, again, started doing a music video based on that and talked to one of the guys that was building it, Gandamu. He brought me into that. That was how I met Gandamu, one of the other authors of Disco Diffusion. And after talking to him, we were talking earlier about how these dominoes fall of how all this stuff happens. Just be trying to explain the domino setup here. He was, I was sharing kind of the research that I was doing, getting into some like in-painting stuff, some, improvements. Cause like I was making music videos, but it took like 5-10 minutes per frame to render. So I would try to make a 10-second video at 15 FPS and 12 hours later would get my result and it was misaligned. So I'm like, okay, gotta do that again. Like, this is not working. I'm going to get more bang for my buck if I learn how to make this stuff run faster. So I had seen Catherine Krausen, who her name was at the top of all these collab notebooks. She was kind of like the big brain in the space. And I'm like, I want to make this faster. I see her posting on Twitter of these performance improvements for this different model. I'm going to just message her and ask her, like, how do you do that? Like, can I, feeling like a little bit nervous of like talking to the person who I don't see her talking around much, but she's like the oracle in this space, so it seems. But I'm like, okay, but I've been on Discord servers for the last few years, DMing artists I look up to. People are just people, and I should do that. And so I did, and she was very kind and very helpful. I learned a whole bunch from her, and trying to not rely too much on someone else, try to stay on, because I don't need her help eventually learning things. And so, I was like, at this point, pretty deep into doing research. And Gandamu said to me, hey, like, you're doing actual practical research. You should talk to Emad, who is giving out access to A100 to people doing research. My first thought was, research? I'm just playing. I'm making art. Oh, this is research because it's code and it's new. And so that's technically research, which was like a huge, like, glass shattering, world breaking thing for me, where I realized that like how much of like these super technical musicians that I'm friends with working every day in these really, the look ahead milliseconds for a compressor to make your kicks stronger. Like they're also doing research. You just don't call it that. You call it music production or whatever. But like they're doing postgraduate DSP work. But whatever. So I'm realizing that, all right, well, okay, this is research. Cool. I should move forward with this. This is really fun. Maybe I can have a job with this. Maybe this is better than my current job. And so I ended up in a conversation with Emad. And he basically offered to support me doing this. At the time, this is kind of what how Stability AI started. They had been doing some stuff in their office in London for about a year before that. But in terms of like expanding it to Discord, it was essentially Emad going around and seeing who were the people who were really making stuff happen and saying, what do you need to keep doing that? Do you need compute? Do you need do you need resources or time? And I'm like, I need both. Because I am losing sleep by having my full-time job and then, well, I'd say coming home, I was working from home, and then, doing my full-time job and then staying up until 2 a.m. and working on this AI stuff. So yes, I need time. I need an actual job. And, I took off March from my job at Microsoft and started building communities, basically. Emad was saying like, all right, you need to build tech, build community, and go for it. And I'm just sitting here like, all right, well, all right, I will. At the time I was still working on the image stuff, but I was like, by the way, my real passion is music. That's what I actually like doing. And he's like, cool. And eventually I was working on some in painting thing for images, and realized that the same technology could be used to make like infinite drum loops, or to help with modifying samples instead of images. And like, oh wait, this is way cooler. And I know way more about this stuff, the technology. The image stuff was getting into like 3D video, which is not my space, nothing I was really motivated to learn about. And I realized, like, wait, what am I doing? I should be working on the audio version of all of this stuff. That will help my friends. That will help me make music. That will be really neat. And it's really underexplored. And a lot of the people that are doing audio ML right now don't have the same bar for quality that I do. A lot of it is like 16K mono piano music. And part of that's because that's, there's a lot of available data for that. And it's easier because it's lower sample rate, smaller sequence lengths, whatever. Or things in like the MIDI space, doing symbolic generation, generate MIDI and then run that through whatever VST preset thing, which I thought was fine, but pretty well explored. And I was more interested in this DataBot stuff of like raw generation, like, how can it apply to sound design? So at this point, I was like, all right, okay, I need to find who is doing this stuff for music and join them. And, like I had done a year before, I looked around and tried to find, all right, where is, like, this must exist now. And looking around at Luther AI, there was nothing for audio. Looking around at Lion, there was one channel for like audio data sets, which was largely speech. And I'm like, all right, I think I'm the one who's going to make this. And I'm like, all right, I'm actually, kind of like looking at my position. I'm like, I've got a huge network of top of the line producers. I'm good at creating Discord servers and good communities. I've got the mathematical and technical knowledge to start executing on creating this stuff. And I've got a person saying he will give me all the compute and money I need to do that. So I'm like, this is not opportunity knocking. It's not opportunity knocking. It's opportunity breaking down my door with a bulldozer, right? This is like, if I don't go with this is the most laid out on a platter, like, hey, do this.
Oh my God.
Whereas, like, if I just
this is the universe being like, Zach, here, go.
Exactly.
Like, talk
here,
about manifesting. This is like where you are exactly supposed to be. And I love this
exactly.
so much.
Right place, right time, right network, right knowledge set. And I was like, if I am not an entrepreneur. I've always been adverse to startups. I worked at Microsoft, very stable job. Even if it wasn't the most fulfilling, it was still, I had a good team and I was doing good work and I liked it. But I was like, this is my calling. This is my first time I've felt something greater than me, that I actually have the ability to go and like change. So I'm like, all right, this is my life now. This is what I do. So I started the Harmonai community. Then it was a private server as I tried to build it up. And, reached out to the guys that I had met a few years before, actually by habit. So I wanted to reach out to the DataBots guys and help them, because on their FAQ, on their website, which is a great FAQ, you should totally go read it, talking about how, like, hey, if, we have ideas of things we could do, we just need more money for it. We need more compute for it. If you've got a bunch of money and a bunch of compute and want to help us, reach out. And I'm like, I do have that. That's me.
I love it. It's just like music nerds in a candy shop. It's right. Like, let's go play. I love it so much.
Yeah, exactly. And so that was essentially my March and April 2022. Time is weird. Was like, all right, I felt like, Danny Ocean, got to go put a team together. It's basically Ahmad being like, all right, go build your team. What are you going to do? You're in charge of this. Go. And I'm like, okay. So I'm like, cold DMing people on Twitter, on, finding people on GitHub who have some cool stuff that they're doing. Being like, hey, I've got this, basically it felt weird just being like, you want to join my Discord server? Messaging them on Twitter or whatever. I'm like, look, we've actually got a lot of compute and we're going to be doing cool things. I promise. I swear. Just join. Check it out. And so I hit up DataBots again, and I don't think I got a response from them. But then I was in the Midjourney server. And this, while it was still in the beta, Ahmad was supporting that as well. It was all kind of part of the same community. A lot of the developers on that came from the same communities that started a lot of the other research. So that kind of splintered off from the same pool of people. Like the Somnai, the guy who made Disco Diffusion, ended up going to work for Midjourney as one of their developers. So I was in there and I see someone had written it was still invite only, and someone had written this song on Midjourney of like, I want to get in. How do I get in? And posted it to YouTube. And the guy who ran it, David H, was like, okay, yeah, I'll send him an invite. That's kind of fun. The guy's name was Jonathan Mann, and he has the Guinness World Record for the most consecutive days writing and releasing a song. He was about to hit 5,000 back then. He passed that back in August. He's been doing it since like 2004 or something. And he came in and he was like, hey, I'm Jonathan Mann. Thanks for the invite. I'm a musician and I'm doing this project with DataBots to give me, immortality in my music, to be able to keep creating this song a day after I'm gone. And I'm like, that's awesome. I want to talk to you. Also, hey, you're talking to DataBots. Could you help me get in contact with them? I'm trying to talk to them. I've got a thing for them. And so, through him, I got DataBots and yada, yada, yada. CJ from DataBots is now working as part of the Harmonai team. And Jonathan Mann, talking with him, he's clearly very into AI music, into this stuff. And I'm like, can we use your music to train these models? And he was like, yeah, sure. So sent me all 5,000 songs and said, go for it. So, the main dance diffusion model is the J-Man model, the Jonathan Mann model, where it's basically, by default, that model will just put out little clips of this one guy singing and playing, no coherent vocals or whatever. So again, by itself, not terribly usable for most people who aren't Jonathan Mann, but enough knowledge in there to take that, fine tune it on your own stuff and have it actually still work. So that was kind of how Harmonai started, was me realizing like this has to happen. There's no good place for this stuff being coordinated. In general, music is not supported as well as the rest of AI research. And I care a whole lot about this. And I have now been given everything I need to make it work. So that was basically just kind of cheerleading, kind of like, hey, let's get going. Let's put teams together. Let's start working on stuff. Yeah, that's how Harmonai came together, how it became part of Stability. Ahmad asked me very early on, like, do you want Harmonai to be independent or part of Stability? And I'm like, definitely part of Stability. I am not a business guy. I don't want to think about tax IDs and all of that. So it's just been an absolutely incredible opportunity for me to be given the freedom and trust to use a whole bunch of resources and try to, start up this whole community and research initiative. That's really what Stability has been for me, is, find people who can actually do the stuff, and enable them. Find people in the community who are just the actual ones who will go and do the work and have good ideas and execute on them, and support them to be able to push forward this whole space.
I love that so much. And you did mention like how small of a community the music AI world is. And you mentioned Drew. So shout out to Drew. He's actually helping produce the show today and is part of the Play audio team. And I didn't realize that we had overlap with DataBots, because Harry Yeff, also known as Reaps One, was the first guest on Creativity Squared. So I love how small the community is and the overlap and how we even came to our conversation. And I kind of want to go back to, and I just like love your passion. It just comes out so much. But I want to go back to the question of kind of the nuclear bomb that we're sitting on, because
right, yeah, that's what I was building back up to. Thank you. I'm like, I know I'm going to forget the actual question. Nuclear bomb. So I went a bit forward to the point I wanted to get at, which is basically when I started realizing what was possible here. Sorry, is there more?
No. I was just going to say, well, I feel like, the whole divergence like really set up like why you're so well equipped to answer this question. Like you helped like found and create Harmonai, and you're so immersed into the community. So you, like, out of anyone, like from the seat where you're sitting, tell us more about what you mean by that nuclear bomb.
Yeah, the background there was also to show like kind of where I come from in terms of like my community is the producers, the DJs, the musicians who are touring the country and still making no money, right? And so I realized, while I was kind of when I realized the same specifically applied to audio, I was like, this is going to be awesome and really fun tools. We can get to where Jukebox was supposed to be and make what we want. But then what does that do to the industry? What does that do to how people consume music? I think that in the short term, it won't change that much at all. It'll be like, adding new production tools. But say it does get to the point where it's like you can make whatever song you want personalized for you. What does it look like when Spotify has a bunch of generated music on it? And a lot of this has changed over since when I was first thinking about this. As it's become a larger conversation, there's been more, statements from streaming services saying they won't host AI generated music or whatever. But basically, really, this is going to be a huge thing. It's going to give a lot of creative power to people who aren't the current artists and producers. And at a high level, I'm in favor of that. Not the just reduction of power of current producers, but there being more artists, there being more people who are able to express themselves or get out what they want in terms of audio. But what will this do in terms of the value of music and all of that? Like, what does this do in terms of streaming revenues for people? And I don't have any answers on that. I have no idea, but it seems like, okay, in the most, naive way of doing this, I don't think that by default, I think it takes extra care and thought to think about how does this help current artists and enable other people to be artists. And so instead of, I guess the nuclear bomb in this case is anyone can make anything. So why would I listen to your music? And there's plenty of answers to that. That's not, I don't think any sort of, I think that the kind of counter to that is, when was music popularity ever about the music? It's not about the actual artifact you put out or the end result. There's no correlation really after a certain point, between subjective quality and fame and fortune. It's all business at that point, marketing, branding, whatever. But the nuclear energy I see as like, now artists are able to get out their ideas more easily. There's an increase in overall like the diversity of sounds and diversity of genres, the exploration of music at whatever length. That I see as like just a whole lot of empowerment of more people are able to make more stuff better. So now I was talking to an artist like talking to Mr. Bill, who is a producer I look up to a lot, really technical producer, and kind of sharing him some stuff I've been working on. And he was saying, this is great because I want to be able to speed up my process of making Mr. Bill music so that my fans have more Mr. Bill music to enjoy. And I'm like, there you go. That's what I want to hear. That's the goal, right? Is like the artists can take these tools and supercharge their own workflows, make new things they couldn't before, get inspiration, help with writer's block, and empower them to do more in whatever aspect they want. I don't think any of this is prescriptive in terms of every artist should do X and that will make you better because Y. People are different. Artists are different. But that, as I see as kind of the difference is how much do you work artists into the process, I think. Looking at if you did this, let's take straw man, big company. I don't want to name an individual company because they're all doing actually pretty good work right now, but take strongman, big corporation. If they controlled the entire production of AI generated music and all of the profits and all of the whole ecosystem, then that could be great for them and their bottom line, but possibly not great for the artistic community. And this kind of comes back to the original thing I was saying about, if there is all of the control by large corporations, it won't necessarily lend itself to, it'll be more corporate, whatever effects that'll have. And so I think the nuclear energy there is everyone being able to have access to these tools and using them in the ways that they see fit and that they think will help them achieve their goals.
It's like the democratization of creativity applied to music. Yeah. Well, and one thing that you had said too is, how I was also thinking about it is that these tools are going to open up not only access to more diverse voices being able to make music, but that they'll be able to make almost any sound possible or make any type of music. Can you share a little bit more about, what types of tools you're enabling them to use and be able to make?
So let's assume it's something that's similar to Stable Diffusion, right? Where you've got some sort of text prompting, text to audio. Let's take it in that context. Assuming you've got data that has enough information in there where you can type in the information you want and get something similar. Assuming all of that, at that point, it's basically it's so open-ended. It's hard to think about what directly people could use, but you can use that to explore like different combinations of genres and ideas, or take those same things and put in your own music and remix it, or there's things like stem separation to take out individual tracks. I think we aren't currently working on that, but put in drum loop and get out a slightly different drum loop, or a totally different drum loop. So one of the cases that I've been thinking about when I was first starting this, I was working on this psytrance track, trying to be super like fastidious with it, apply all of the knowledge that I had. I guess this more technical track. And I was adding in drum fills, because you need a bunch of drum fills for the different transitions between different sections. And I had this Cashmere sample pack from Splice that had some really good tom fills in it that I really liked, but I'd already used the one or two that I liked from the pack that I had. And I'm like, all right, how can I get more drum fills? I'm like, all right, I could either go on Splice or whatever and find more tom fills, hope they aren't completely tonally different from the ones that I have. I could learn how to record drums and make my own. Yeah, that's not going to happen. I can chop up these fills and try to make them a little bit different, which I tried, but it made it worse, right? It wasn't the same thing. At the same time, I'm working with Disco Diffusion, where I can put in an init image, noise and denoise, and get a variation on that image. And I'm like, that's what I need. I need a thing where I can put in my drum fills and get variations on that, get slightly different drum fills that still semantically do the same thing, rhythmically do the same thing, but aren't the same sound 4 times in my song. So that's one of those cases is variations on sounds, as well as things like interpolations. So you can actually do that in Dance Diffusion already without having to have text prompting, is give it 2 sounds and find what is between those 2 sounds in some sort of semantic space that it's going through. Yeah, so I mean, and then things like sound design, can you type in Skrillex growl bass and get out some cool FM sounding bass? I'm a big fan of the idea of having some bass model for that, but then fine tune that on your library. So one of the use cases I think about a lot is the musician who's been working on music for 15 years and they've got a terabyte hard drive of samples, and they never use most of it because they don't go into the library that much. But giving them the option to say, here is some base model on your computer, point this program at that root folder for your samples, hit go, and you will now have this explorable version of your own library. And one of the things that CJ talks about when he gives his talk as Databots, he'll give research talks and things at conferences. He'll show this picture of space, like the Hubble Deep Field with all the different galaxies, and say, these visible galaxies are the points right now in music, the songs that currently exist. We want to explore the spaces in between them. So the question, that I think is what excites me the most about a lot of this technology, is using it as exploration, creating a map of music and saying, where are the holes and what would be there.
I love that.
I see a lot of creativity. It's kind of thing I was thinking about before in the context of like artists who will really specifically try to copy, one artist's sound for their outputs or whatever. And I say, it's not about necessarily, don't copy one artist. It's not necessarily about having a sound that is totally unique. It's more like find 10 different artists you like, combine them, and that's you. We're all influenced by things that we listen to and things that we like. No art is created in an absolute vacuum. And I'm really interested in seeing what that looks like computationally. What does that look like mathematically? What does that look like when it's not someone thinking, what can the computer do? I'm fascinated by, this concept of can these models learn some abstraction of music theory that is different from what we learn. It's different, it's not specifically Western music theory or each music theory. It's what is the actual, it'll learn something else, right? And then being able to explore that kind of mind model of creativity and exploring that space is what really interests me. I think in general with these tools, one of the things I try to push is that it's already currently possible to automate the entire process of songwriting. Not necessarily for a great chart-topping hit, but I could go, into GarageBand, pull together some loops that have the same name, go grab an acapella in the same key, put it over there, run it through automated mixing and mastering stuff, and put it on Spotify, right? Will I become popular and have a fan base? Probably not from doing that, but you still can. But people don't do that because as an artist, you want to have some sort of impact on your work. You want to feel like it is yours. You want to be able to impart something of yourself into that work. But what that something is different for everybody. There are plenty of people where songwriting is their favorite part, but they don't want to do mixing and mastering or recording or whatever. Plenty of people who it's like songwriting is whatever. I'm much more interested in the fine touches of the timbre of the sounds and the final mix down or whatever. And I think that it's important in general, regardless of AI or not, to find out what parts of the workflow of creativity do you like and want to throw yourself into, and which parts do you see as a rote and you want to automate to get yourself to the parts that you still like. And I think that in general, that is my goal with these tools. That in terms of creativity and art and tools for artists, I'm going to make no claim that this is going to change everything and you got to use this or you're going to fall behind. I think that's just obnoxious when people say stuff like that. This is a new tool like the synthesizer, like the guitar amplifier, like the 808 drum machine that will be what you make of it. That's kind of my point to artists in terms of like, what is the point of this? It's the point is what you want to do with it. You don't have to use these tools. They might not be, for someone who their favorite thing is songwriting and then playing acoustic guitar and singing an open mic, I don't have a whole lot for them right now, but maybe I do. Maybe if they can put in, nice, happy acoustic guitar song and get some inspiration on what chords to play or whatever, then that's great. But yeah, I think that, I try not to bring in too much hype or FOMO. I think that's not productive in a creative space like this. I try to lead with substance and be like, here's this new tool. Go use it in ways that I wouldn't think of. I'm really excited by people taking this technology and using it, quote unquote, wrong, right? Using it in ways that I wouldn't expect. If it would be hubris for me to think that I could predict what these tools would be used for. But historically, the big changes in new genres and new scenes in music very frequently come from advancements in technology. So if you look at things like the digital sampler allowing, sampling in hip hop, the DJ Kool Herc at a pool party or wherever he was, hooking up two turntables and scratching and mixing things and inventing DJing is not the intended use of record players. The 808 kick, the 808 and the 303 resonance knobs being so widely abused, auto-tune being turned all the way down to zero and creating that, creating T-Pain's career and the whole SoundCloud rap scene, heavy metal coming from advancements in amplifiers and guitars. So I can keep listening. Probably every genre starts with some new technology, pop coming from radio or whatever. And so I think that one of the most impactful things that one can do in music, I don't think that writing songs individually, I'm going to change the world. I don't think that I have a story to tell. This is my story to tell, right? I don't think I have some heartfelt song to write to change America, to change people's whatever. That's not going to be my impact on art. But as a, technological person, this has a strong potential to create new scenes, create new genres, create something different. And that, I think, is what I'm most excited about, is just what creative people will do with these tools.
I love that. And so well said. Well, and one question that I have that you mentioned, I forget which gentleman was talking about, thinking about his legacy, the guy that trained the system with 5,000 of his songs.
Jonathan Mann. Yeah.
And this question actually comes from also listening to Dolly Parton's America, a podcast. I grew up in Dolly Parton's hometown. She's a dream guest for the podcast. But interestingly, she's actually very forward thinking. And it was hinted in that series that she's already thinking of postpartum, like how her legacy could live on and potentially, I don't know, tracks or whatever. But now with all these AI tools, like I'm really curious if she's cloning her voice or opening up her music. So this is, if anyone's listening that can hook us up with Dolly Parton, let me know. But I'm so curious how she's thinking about, her legacy related to technology. And I'm curious, with that gentleman, the man, and legacy, like if you've heard of any other interesting, artists thinking about legacy related to these tools too, or how they're thinking about it. Cause I think it opens up a whole new way of just, aside from putting your songs out there, of what you can do in terms of legacy too.
Yeah. I haven't heard, I don't have any more notable examples of that. I mean, I know that, Grimes has been super active in terms of AI voice technology and things like that. I'm sure others have mentioned it. Yeah, I haven't seen many things like that. I am curious to hear more about that, about Dolly Parton and what she wants to do. Actually, I think I just heard about Dolly Parton kind of ties into one of my thoughts about AI creativity. People will say like, "Oh, this makes it too easy. It's too fast. It's too quick to make these things now. Art takes time, and if it's too easy, then it's not real art." Which I reject, because there is not a correlation between time it takes for a project and quality. I have spent weeks on terrible music. Dolly Parton wrote Jolene and I Will Always Love You in the same car trip. So on the same night. Yep. So like, All I Want for Christmas Is You was written in 45 minutes. So it's like speed is not a thing, but there is taste. I think that is, I guess another point I want to make is that taste is still a thing. AI generated stuff. If you think it's bad, that's okay. If you think it's low quality, you're allowed to. If you are a person using these tools and making things and wanting to put them out there, you're still applying your taste and you will be judged for it, for better or for worse. So this is not, I think that in general, taste will still apply, and maybe the process of creation starts to increasingly be the process of curation. But we're already kind of on that slope with things like, sample packs and the fact there's only so much you can actually do melodically in music. It all kind of ends up being curating different things into some sort of complete piece.
Yeah, and one other interesting thing that I've been thinking a lot about with Dolly Parton too, related to AI and music, is she's such a prolific writer and, a general national treasure. But she actually has thousands of traditional mountain melody songs that she has written that has never seen the light of day. And almost, I've been thinking about like the value of things that aren't online now, how much more valuable those could be if and when she ever releases them, and how they could be released, which I think opens up a whole nother can of worms about, well, and this is actually something that Harry spoke to in our interview too, about using the machines and training them with your own data for your music creation and stuff, which, and how that improves like your own art is collaborating with yourself, which I found super fascinating what he said. So I don't know if you have any reactions to that or not.
No, I totally agree. I think that, he's already the example I would have given on this. He used worked DataBots to make a model on his own beatboxing, and it put out, samples and flows that he was like, oh, that's actually a pretty good idea. I should start doing that. So we saw the same thing with like the game of Go. AlphaGo was a model that was released by DeepMind, not released, but trained by DeepMind, and it famously beat the world's best Go player at a game that people thought was a computer could never learn that. Well, it did, and it didn't end the game of Go, and it didn't go well. It made them all better by people learning. Working with with the bot, working with the program, they were able to get better at their craft. So yeah, I really look forward to that. I think it's a great move of, particularly if you have a sizable library, take one of these models, train it on your own stuff, and see what comes out. If it's nothing inspiring, then okay, sure. But I think that it's that's unlikely. I don't know. Maybe I don't want to make that claim. I don't know if that's true or not. But I think there's a lot of potential in terms of like these models can, given the right data and train on your own stuff, make things that are similar enough but different. And that's pretty much what people want for a lot of things, is that similar but different. So I think it's a great tool for those kinds of things. Even back with Jukebox, I had a song that I wrote, and I fed it in there, and it continued the song after the part where I cut it off, and it added these really cool drum breaks and rhythms. I'm like, that's actually pretty neat. Added a little synth that I took that and recreated that, used it in a different song. So it's like, yeah, all these things can, it can give you the little bits of inspiration you need to take something and run from there.
Well, since you mentioned the game Go, I've got to use this opportunity to mention the movie AlphaGo. I highly recommend it. And it's got this amazing scene, and it's a spoiler alert, where the best player of Go at the time, he actually did win one game against the machine, and the guys behind the computer said that it was like 1 in like a million chance that a human or like anyone would select that. And when they interviewed the player, he was like, that's the only move I saw. And they call it like the God move, and I just like love that scene in that movie so much.
Yeah. No, I'm really excited to see what happens with music, with these technologies, what people will embrace. And when you put out technology like this, creative technology, you cannot predict what's going to happen. People will do things that are 1,000 times more clever and creative and 1,000 times more cringe than I thought possible with whatever we put out. And that's impact, the Serum, Massive, the big synths that are out there. There's plenty of incredible music on there, and plenty of incredibly bad music made with those tools. So that's humanity. That's not an AI thing. There is a range of quality that is different for every person, and people will do things.
I promise. I've been kicked off of karaoke stages because I'm so bad at singing. So I promise I will not add to the bad music. I will stay in my lane. We'll definitely check back in because you've kind of given a few teasers of some things that you can't announce yet. So we'd love to check back in, see what announcements will be coming, other cool projects or massively cringe projects to talk about too.
Hopefully they aren't mine that are massively cringe. I'll do my best.
Well, before we sign off, we always like to do kind of wishes or predictions or, any final thoughts that you'd like to let everyone know before signing off.
Do things different. Maybe that's more of an ask than a wish, but I hope that things get weirder in music. I hope that people use these tools to make new things, not try to replicate existing things.
I love that. And how can people get in touch with you, or do you want to plug any links or anything?
Harmonai.org, harmonai.org, is our pretty barren homepage. There's a link on there to get to our Discord server, join the community, and stick around. Every Thursday we have office hours where I'll be on Discord stage just answering questions, chatting about what I've been reading about, working on lately. And we do research presentations and production challenges. So come through and hang out.
Amazing. Well, Drew, who's on the phone, who's producing this, thank you for putting us in touch. Zach, it has been an absolute pleasure. I know I've learned so much from you, and I know all of our listeners and viewers are too. So thank you so much for your time and for leading the charge on the anti-big company creativity in music and AI. We need more people like you in the space.
I'm happy to come on and all of us working together to make sure this stays cool.
Yeah, I love that. Well, here's to staying cool. Thank you for spending some time with us today. We're just getting started and would love your support. Subscribe to Creativity Squared on your preferred podcast platform and leave a review. It really helps. And I'd love to hear your feedback. What topics are you thinking about and want to dive into more? I invite you to visit creativitysquared.com to let me know. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for our free weekly newsletter so you can easily stay on top of all the latest news at the intersection of AI and creativity. Because it's so important to support artists, 10% of all revenue Creativity Squared generates will go to ArtsWave, a nationally recognized nonprofit that supports over 100 arts organizations. Become a premium newsletter subscriber or leave a tip on the website to support this project and ArtsWave. And premium newsletter subscribers will receive NFTs of episode cover art and more extras to say thank you for helping bring my dream to life. And a big, big thank you to everyone who's offered their time, energy, and encouragement and support so far. I really appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. This show is produced and made possible by the team at Play Audio Agency. Until next week, keep creating.